They say time waits for no one, but for people with Alzheimer's disease, that's especially true because for them,
she was just such a beautiful, beautiful woman. Inside and out, she really was.
Time is stolen. Inside the brain cells of Patricia Smith, Noreen Smith's mother-in-law, that beauty weaved a tangled web of twisted fibers caused by a naturally occurring protein that sticks or clumps. There are two types of proteins that can clump, ultimately killing cells. The result is the same: Alzheimer's disease.
I think it was a little bit shocking because we weren't thinking that.
It's a hidden epidemic because these are not the people you see even at the grocery store.
But a new drug called aducanumab seeks to remove the buildup of one of those proteins, forming amyloid plaques. It's something Elkhart neurologist Dr. Thomas Vidic and the Indiana Medical Research Arm have been looking into with similar compounds for almost a decade. The goal seems simple enough.
If we can get the amyloid out, maybe the brain won't keep deteriorating.
Giving Alzheimer's patients and their families more time.
Neurons are post-mitotic, so we can't regenerate them once they're dead.
Aducanumab is not a cure, and many doctors aren't sure it even works. Doctors like Brian Blagg, the director of the University of Notre Dame's Warren Center for Drug Discovery.
It's hard for me to understand that this approach works, whereas a similar approach by Elon didn't work, and then a similar approach by most major pharmaceutical companies in the world went after it, beta and gamma secretase. That didn't work either. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me why this one does.
Dr. Blagg is basing his opinion off what he's read about the drug online and his scientific background.
They skipped phase 2 clinical trials, which is unusual. And then the phase 3, they wasn't going well. And then they came back and reanalyzed the data and said, yes, it did go well.
We see the amyloid leaving the brain, but we don't see the person improving.
Back in November 2020, an FDA advisory panel voted against recommending the drug, but a month ago in June 2021, that same panel changed its mind, saying benefits outweigh risks, and the FDA fully approved it on an accelerated basis, something the federal agency has done with drugs in the past.
The point for these accelerated approvals is to get them out to people with the hopes that they benefit people as soon as possible.
Dr. Blagg points to the coronavirus vaccines as a good example, but when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, treatments have been few and far between. Aducanumab is the first new drug on the market in almost 20 years.
We don't have a treatment that does anything but treat the symptoms right now.
That hasn't stopped Dr. Vidic's approach toward the treatment.
Because the concept is good, we're looking at it real seriously about using it for our patients.
The drug also has advocacy groups like the Alzheimer's Association of Greater Indiana rejoicing.
Ultimately, it provides hope for and could provide benefit for those who are living with mild cognitive impairment or early dementia due to Alzheimer's disease.
Census data from 2010 showed nearly 80,000 people suffered from dementia or Alzheimer's disease over a 7-year period. New census data isn't available yet, but the current numbers are expected to be much higher.
10,000 people in the United States turn 65 every day.
It's probably going to be the #1 killer of people in time.
And most people with Alzheimer's disease end up at memory care facilities like Hubbard Hills and Elkhart.
The majority of our people living here have either Alzheimer's or the vascular type of dementia.
Debbie Caribou has worked in memory care for nearly 50 years.
It is a growing epidemic, if you will, for seniors.
These stats from the Alzheimer's Association show the devastating effects. Since 2000, deaths from Alzheimer's disease have increased 145%, and in 2020 alone, an estimated $250 billion was spent on caregiving.
Alzheimer's is a huge problem, and so any way we can start to touch the issue and make some inroads, I think is important. And that's the reason I'm as interested in this drug as I am, because I think the beginning of the answer is here.
Dr. Vidic says he expects to start giving doses of the controversial new drug in Michiana within the next 2 months, adding some protocols for infusions are already in place.
I don't want to jump into this for everyone. There may be some patients that it's worth a try.
But those who qualify for treatment may have to undergo invasive procedures like spinal taps or other tests, and costs could also be an issue. The drug retails at $56,000 a year, and right now, Most insurance companies don't cover it.
That will be a barrier to some people receiving access to the treatment.
Noreen Smith says 56 grand is not something her family could have afforded for her mother-in-law when she was alive.
I don't think we could. That's just, to me, it's outrageous.
People need to realize somebody needs to pay for all these drugs that have failed.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, in 2019, pharmaceutical companies spent $83 billion on drug research and development, and aducanumab is far from the only costly drug on the market. But both doctors say they expect insurance will eventually cover it.
I can't imagine how we couldn't provide insurance to cover the cost of the drug.
We are advocating for coverage for this treatment.
Medicare and Medicaid services recently began the process for coverage of aducanumab, though decision could take up to 9 months. Noreen Smith's mother-in-law died in 2010 at the age of 85, but throughout the 5 years she served as a caregiver, she and her husband didn't have anyone to turn to.
We were thinking, what are we going to do? I mean, my father-in-law had leukemia.
It's why Smith now runs a support group for Alzheimer's caregivers. Emotions are mixed between love and anger. The burden of care can be overwhelming.
The anger, I think, comes from a place of, this is my life now, and I really don't have a life because I work full-time, then I come home to this, and it's 24/7.
She says at her last support group meeting, no one there was familiar with the new drug. Among doctors, the hope with this new treatment is that it leads to something better. And because of the FDA's accelerated approval of aducanumab, Biogen has until 2030 to prove the effectiveness of the drug.
We should have an answer long before that.
The first glimmer of hope for those with this devastating disease.